Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to Third Culture Convos, where your boys, third culture kids, interpret the world through perspectives that are convoluted and a little mixed up. And actually, one of the things that I've been thinking about when it comes to this, and I think really hits the nail on the head on how it feels. I had this realization last week that I will never feel settled. I will never feel at home. Whenever I start to settle down, I get an itch that tells me to start moving again. And to think that I will never, ever feel settled sometimes freaks me out. And it freaked me out in that moment. Even though I've spent a lifetime kind of feeling that way and also understanding that's how you feel, man. That's how you float on this boat. And in order to kick that off, we're going to move into current affairs, because it seems like the world is, as opposed to normally, it seems like the world has flipped on its sides. And the guys, I have had a really busy weekend of parenting. And so the guys have picked up a whole bunch of stories to talk about on today's episode.
And I just mentioned first, it's one thing to feel not settled. It's one thing to feel not settled. It's a whole nother thing to be told to go back to where you came from, wherever you go.
Yeah. Wherever you go.
So in my example, plenty of Americans in America have asked me politely to go back to where I came from. And similarly, in Pakistan, I have been asked millions of times, why are you here? Why don't you go back to where you came from? So it's one thing to be unsettled. It's another to be told everywhere you go that you'll go back to where you came from. But yes, there is plenty of news happening from across the world. Complicated and complex is definitely the way to describe it. Rashid, any one story you want to lead us off with? Let's go with you.
Jeez, there's so many. France is on fire.
Then stop. One, France is on fire. And I just want to say something about Macron, man. Because I know he's listening. I know he listens. He listens to our podcast. I know. That guy's got ears.
The French subtitles.
I think that guy's got ears everywhere. He hears everything. He listens to nothing. I think that's his game plan. Because he really, man, this guy's a class act. And I say it sarcastically, of course. The things that he says and the way he approaches things and his solutions to things. Every time something comes out of this guy's mouth, I'm like, wow, this guy. I feel like this guy's competing with Trudeau. I feel like they compete. You guys shared something over the weekend in the group that Macron said. What was it?
Video games for the violence.
Playing video games while his police force have not left a person they didn't beat up. They haven't left a person.
That same analogy has been used in the United States for the school shootings multiple times.
It's video games, right? It's kids' imaginations. You know what the problem is that they just walk around as individuals.
It's rap movies, it's music, it's rap music, it's movies, it's video games, it's everything except guns or economic conditions. Or
the marginalization of
that's always been the narrative. Yeah. That's always been the narrative. It's always Ice Cube's fault. You know what? And I was listening to Ice Cube explain something that was really funny today. So it's like when they put the whole parental advisory on the CDs, right? So the NWA comes out with a Straight Outta Compton. The world is some people are like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Think of the children. Think of them. And so they say, how do we think of the children? All right. As a compromise, because they wanted them to pull all the CDs and arrest them. And they're like, we're not pulling no CDs. Okay, how about you put a parental advisory on it so parents know what to get? And then they said, all right, we'll do that. We'll put a parental advisory. And then it became the whole cover of the album was a parental advisory, which is genius, like just absolute genius. And then kids wouldn't get CDs unless they had that sticker on them, because you didn't want that. And then an artist would put that sticker on them so they could sell their CDs, even if it was the cleanest record ever. And so it entirely backfired. This approach of, oh no, we have to protect the kids, entirely backfired. And now the kids are seeking out that content, which you thought by blaming video games or by blaming Ice Cube, that you were going to avoid these things. And I think a big part of that is when, and this is going to sound crazy, this is when I get real good, is that whenever you have marginalized communities find their way out of the hole and start to come out and to stake their own claims, that's when the establishment comes in and then blames them for sticking their head above the ground, and blames us, so blaming the video games and blaming these things, because the issue isn't that that they shot, like, the issue isn't that they're
The
shooting
17-year-old.
children. Yeah, the issue isn't that they're doing those crimes. The issue is that they're watching, and then the issue was also social media. And so social media, that's what Macron said, was that social media was encouraging the violence against the police officers, which, man, police officers are armed and dangerous. They're the ones that bring the weapons to the party.
The thing is, the riot police in France are known to be incredibly violent.
Yeah.
But there's no discussion with them. They go in with tear gas. They go in not with live bullets, but they have pretty heavy ammunition.
There's this.
They go in with a very heavy fist when they call in the French riot police, at least.
And when people need to have outlets for their frustrations, and don't have even legal outlets to come, like, it's not like the courts are like, oh, let's listen to what all these immigrants have to say. Let's go listen to what all these guys, like, no, these guys are immigrants because they're not on the French national team yet.
Here's the thing, though, but I also wanted, just for the sake of being somewhat of a devil's advocate, like, I didn't know what happened at first, and then I started seeing all these videos being posted, and I'm like, holy geez, like, it's the same discussion that was happening in the United States. Why are you burning down your own neighborhood? Like, you're burning down the stores that you go to every day. And why target your local community as well when go attack, you can't really do it, but go after the police buildings or something like that. Like, I feel like there would be a better way to do it than actually attacking your actual stores that you would go to on a daily basis.
There is a decent percentage of these people that are just looting. They're like, there was a Reddit post of, they were showing live TV of a store that was completely demolished and a guy standing there robbing the place. He's about to exit and cops are coming in, and it was our watch people die inside. So like, he died inside when he saw the cops. And so there has been a lot of taking advantage of the situation. And it was the same in the US. The people have taken advantage of the situation. And it's the same with this Macron. He's taking advantage and pointing the blame elsewhere. Why are we not discussing police standards throughout the world? I feel like every country needs to, like, genuinely reflect on its policing standards. And if we need a 4-year degree for this or 2-year degree for technical skills, plumbing and stuff, why don't we have that same mentality towards the badge and this amount of authority? Especially Europe, I don't know the standards and if there's any requirements. In the US, I know it's state by state, and it's a lot of states are surprisingly really low requirements, where you're like, it's actually harder to become an X-ray technician than it is to become a cop. And the pay and the benefits and the authority. I want to mention again, not just the tangible authority. There's also a clear psychological, intangible authority that you control when you wave that badge around. And we all know this. And they know it, and they take full advantage of it in their private lives. Some of them.
Well, they can.
The training is obviously different in different parts of the world. Like Scandinavian countries, they're a lot more focused on conflict resolution without the violence, let's say. More talk the person down. Whereas it's like,
De-escalation and diffusal.
De-escalation and diffusing the situation by words and by actions and by being calm and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, there's that story recently in South Africa, outside of a nightclub. A cop and an undercover and off-duty officer got into an altercation outside of a nightclub, and the off-duty officer got shot by the officer on duty, I'm gonna assume they knew each other because they're in Johannesburg
Well,
and
you were gonna
and
drop the badge, right? You're gonna say, if I'm a
but
cop
something
and
happened.
I get pulled over, the first thing you're gonna find out is that I'm a cop. Because, bro, bros, we're bros. Yeah, like we got this. I think you guys ever seen the documentary or heard of the documentary, French documentary called Monopoly of Violence?
No.
I think I've mentioned it before. And the monopoly, and it's a French documentary that kind of shines a light on the idea that the only sanctioned, like, civil violence that we allow is when the state and the government is conducting it against its own people. And so if a group of people, and this is where, I mean, I tie this to the Canadian trucker convoy, and to when there is a large group of people that come together to express discontent. And this is me countering your point, Rashid, on the devil's advocate. Like, why would you loot this area? Why? When there is a response to an organized, let's say, agenda, and you are Wall Street, like the sit out on Wall Street. You are a disorganized group that's come together with various ideas. The even the demand or the expectation that group will have a clear agenda and a clear objective and all these types of things is like it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to think that they would, because they're coming together in response to an affront. And in their disorganization, is expected because there's no leader. It's not like it was planned. It's not like they were planning, oh, wow, we're going to plan this one when the next killing happens or when the next issue happens. Now we're going to go and stand out in the streets. And then the state always seems to use its monopoly on violence to disperse and control and escalate the issue, because they come with the B-52s or the R-55s or the whatever, and they show up even when you get to an airport, right? Like the customs officials all look like they're about to crack your head open, right?
I think
And
one of the
why?
requirements for a customs official is to have no personality
Yeah,
whatsoever
it's to look
and
like
to be
they're
incredibly rude.
yeah, and big, and they put them
And
in
scary, they
Kevlar.
have scary personalities. Even
Yes.
the way they say, "How are you doing?" is, yo, I'm
Oh.
sorry, man.
No, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't kill him. I don't know. I don't know. It's so so I think that the show of force that they do on a civil society. So I'm not talking like military on military. You guys can, you know what? Yes, you should show force against each other. There's space for the military in my worldview, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But on civilian populations, they're so quick to pull the trigger. They're so quick to pull the trigger and to send them out there and be like, okay, now we got to control them. We got to do this. But then by doing that, they escalate the issue and then say, okay, now we can't even and push the civil. Here's what I'm saying. Push the civil group to violence so that they can discredit them and say, look at all these violent hooligans destroying their local bodega, their local icebox. And the only way to control them is to send in the police and to clean them up and like the chattel that they are.
I can't say too much right now because of where I am, but this exact scenario has been playing out here in Pakistan for the last 2 to 3 months. When they arrested Imran Khan, people protested, they gathered together, a motley crew of disenfranchised people who were just united against something. They were not united for something necessarily. They were just united against the idea of imprisoning their leader. And there was violence on that day, the 9th of May. And now, today, these days, just yesterday, 2 days ago, an army spokesperson spoke about it, and the army is insisting that it's civilians who caused all of this chaos and violence, and the civilian bodies, the political people are saying that you guys did a false flag operation, and we have clear videos of trucks of people just leaving, and this is like clearly, I can't say too much again right now where I am, but this exact scenario is playing out as we speak, that one is trying to suppress another, and in response they're just escalating further and further.
That's it's the game plan, right? Like my and so when I heard and I think and what's scary is that this game plan goes beyond race in the sense that even in France or in the thing, it's not. Initially, I want to say whenever immigrants get together, then they're gonna just start to knock them, and that's true. I think that is also true, but it's also anybody that's anti their agenda, and their agenda has like more and more sounds more and more terrifying. Like it just because it's all about controlling you for your own good because you're too stupid to understand all the good things that I bring you. And, like you're just so dumb, man. You're so dumb
Ungrateful
and
and very
ungrateful.
ungrateful.
Yeah, look at us, like what we're doing here, and we're gonna we're gonna force the world into the 22nd century, kicking and screaming in the name of freedom. Like it's the absurdity. It's absurd.
The absurdity. What you were just describing about heavy-handed force, one of the other news stories obviously is Israel-Palestine, so the incursion, actually just the attack on Jenin, the refugee camp, which the Israelis claim is for the purpose of rounding up Islamic Jihad militants for recent attacks they've done, but
But for their own good. Huh?
for their own good, but like
Right?
you're using, so it's a double-edged sword here. There's so many different angles involved in this whole situation because you have these Israelis using one of the most sophisticated attacks they've ever used. So they're using drones, they're using missiles, they're using foot soldiers. They blocked off the refugee camp and sent in very different arms of their military. So they've sent in like the actual army, they've sent in the border police, like they've sent in big guns to find these people. And then they hit buildings and stuff and they say, but then these buildings that they hit are also right beside like mosques or schools or community centers and collateral damage because the narrative always is, but they always hide themselves right beside these civilian type of areas. So then if we're going to attack that target, then that's just going to end up happening. And then just before we came on, I saw that there was a car ramming / stabbing in Tel Aviv. Hamas has already claimed responsibility for it, for what's happening in Jenin. So it's just like it. But the thing is that because Israel has the power, they can justify what they're doing in the sense of saying that, but they're attacking us in our borders, which have never been identified. And we're protecting ourselves. But then Hamas does the same thing in Israel, but because they're the weaker one, it's blatantly terrorism. But the responsibilities for that particular situation is just pick someone because and like multiple people in multiple organizations because it's not just one fault when it comes to that particular situation. But again, it's the whole concept of communal punishment that goes on within that particular situation. So then back to France, people are in the neighborhood, they're rioting, they're burning down the buildings and all that kind of stuff. And then heavy-handed approach by the riot police comes in. It's just, it doesn't matter who you are. I saw some videos actually where parents were going out and actually grabbing their kids and taking them home. Like their 17, 18-year-old kids, they found them in the crowd and they're like, you're coming with me, you little shit. Like, let's go home. Which I think is good parenting.
I don't know, man. I think, man, maybe the parents need to be out there too. Because like I
But
could
you know,
see that
but you
argument,
know what's
man.
going on in
It's
their head.
usually the youth, but it's usually the youth. Like we can't dismiss. Like man, I'm with you. I always dismiss the youth. I'm into that. but but when you got the set, they're usually the dismissing of their concerns because It's not the 50-year-olds that are gonna go march out onto the streets because they got too much to lose, because they have a lot of it built into their establishment. Young
It's not
people have
only
a
that, keep in
future.
mind, a lot of them did it in the past already. So a lot of these people we're talking about
Yes.
as well, they're probably from the Algerian community, and their parents are probably from that community where the transition happened, where Algeria became officially independent from France. And they probably were a part of the upheaval in Algeria at the time when
May have,
Algeria was
yes.
still a
And you saw
department of
and they
France.
saw the violence.
And
They
they're
saw what
like,
happens.
I know what can happen, so I don't want my kid to be a part of that. But then it's a bit of a
Well,
cycle
no,
fulfilling itself, isn't
I'm
it?
with you, and that's why I'm focusing my opinion on the gaslighting that is Macron.
Hmm.
Because then when you come out and instead of like, all right, man, you know what? I hear you. The police are a little, they're they're heavy-handed. You know what? Let's try to address this. I hear you. And he won't. That's not and anything in that. No, he does. He does the opposite. He says, "Man, you know what it is? It's social media and it's video games, and you guys and everyone who." And then what they'll do is they'll introduce a law that limits the social sharing of these types of things, so that they cannot organize. So, and similar to how in Egypt, right? Like you're never gonna have another tahrir.
Can I bring up one you just made me think of one huge hypocritical point related to like European politics in general and telling the East what they should be doing. France has never acknowledged, nor have they ever apologized for the massacres they did during the Algerian War of Independence, essentially, is what it was. But France would be one of the first ones to criticize Turkey for never acknowledging and apologizing for the Armenian genocide. So who are you to tell Turkey what to do when you're not doing it and you still haven't acknowledged what you've done? And a large portion of your population is a product of what happened in Algeria.
Man, the world is a hierarchy of truth, and some sit on top, and some sit at the bottom, right? And most sit at the bottom, actually. And like you just, what do you want, man? What do you want?
It's a pyramid because there's not enough space at the top
Yeah.
for everyone. So there's
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got the
And the
small
top is
elite at the
taken.
top.
The top is taken. And any affront to that, any group trying to get together with that, you know what? It's a video games, making them think that they could possibly do that. You know what it is? You know what it probably also is? It's Zizek. It's Zizek and all these other writers that sit there, and Edward Said talking about Orientalism, and all these other guys just
Hmm.
trying to get people going. And you know what? Maybe we should just silence those guys. How about we ban them so that they can't have social media? You know what? What they say? Misinformation. Bam. Like they have all the tools. They've been
Fact
using it the
checkers.
entire time. This,
Fact checkers. Boom,
welcome to the
gone.
crazy episode, folks.
We talked about like physical impositions, France, protest, police brutality, physical violence, Israel, Palestine, physical. Wasim, you're segueing closer and closer. You keep mentioning that what they'll start doing is on a systematic administrative level. At some point, we're going to stop doing the physical act and we're going to get to the one hierarchy, one step above, which is already happening in America with the Supreme Court. There've been a number of rulings recently to do with affirmative action, to do with LGBT, like whether a Christian organization has to sell to a gay couple, websites, weddings, gay websites, fake websites with gay
Oh, the right to discriminate on your customer. Yeah, okay.
And there's been 2, 3, 4 of these rulings that the student loan forgiveness was shot down. Biden's student loan thing was completely like, yo, we don't want this. So there've been 2, 3, 4 recent rulings that are very un-Gen Z like. They're being made by pure boomers, late boomers. These are the parents of boomers making decisions. It's not even boomers. We're like still one generation above. And most of the people who are being affected and being limited in administrative freedoms, again, not necessarily physical, but they're just cutting it at the source before we even. There is no war in Ba Sing Se. There is no problem because there is no problem. And that's happening in the US. And yes, it has been a crazy week. Welcome to the crazy episode. every place is fucked and we're all just fucked.
Thailand just had another. Thailand
Whoa.
Thailand recently had a change of government. I did not know that Thailand's been under military regime since 2006. And so basically the two of the largest opposition parties have formed a government now, and they've had issues for the past 2 months of trying to decide who the Speaker of the House will be, which is a huge deal because they dictate a lot of legislation and stuff like that, and how discussions are, obviously as a speaker, how discussions are steered and everything. And so they ended up actually, in the end, they ended up electing just one person because there was discussions about different people. And they ended up selecting one person who has done it before in the past, but also they felt was the best that toes the line in between all of the cracks of all the different parties. But the thing is, I was like, no, not Thailand. I want to go there on vacation. Like you started off by saying you feel unsettled. You get this itch of always needing to move again. That's my life in a nutshell. Not only being in aviation, but that's just the way I've always had a hot foot. But then selfish side of me coming out right now saying that there are certain parts of the world that I just want to remain stable so I can continue going there on vacation. So Thailand's one of them. Portugal is one of them, which will always stay stable. Colombia, I don't know. It's always on the edge. Colombia can go either way, but it's been pretty okay recently. So yeah, I mean that we can be selfish
What
at some point.
I don't think it's even selfish to think that you want parts of the world to be stable. I don't understand how that.
For my personal reasons.
I said I just want peace for everybody. I know it's a selfish ask. I know. Like, who do I think I am, really? I just want everybody to be all right. There was a British this British guy. The Brits, they're always good with this stuff. But I think his name's Douglas Murray, and you'll see him on the news waves and stuff, and like an intellectual, a British intellectual. And what he asserts is that what we're witnessing, with the States and with the West, is a fall of civilization. And whenever there has been in history the decline and the fall and the crash of a civilization, it has been usually coupled with an obsession with gender. And so he said that when the Greeks fell, they were obsessed with gender. When the Romans fell, they were obsessed with the Egyptians. They just started going like crazy, picking up like all these like social issues and things like that, and they become obsessed with it. That's what he says. That's not what I said. I don't know if it's true or not. But I do it giving the theory some credence, or giving the assertion some credence. What he's saying is that all of this wildness has led to, because you can't hold on, you can't keep control of stuff. So then you are focusing on like, I feel like even by saying the word gender, it's like oh shit, oh shit. Hold on, I didn't know we were gonna talk about this, and you start putting your you straighten out your tie and shit. Like, oh boy.
Oh, I think
Like,
it's time for me to go. I'll see you
yeah,
later. Bye.
yeah. Oh, we're gonna talk about that now. All right. And I said, I know when I said it now, I said it in the context of a decline of civilization, because I do feel that the not to sound crazy, but to be crazy, that the end of this civilization is like the end of the sort of the not the age of individuality, hence the hyper focus on gender, but it's the like the idea of shifting everybody into this like communal, and so that they can be controlled, like communal and divided at the same time, like a common global digital currency, right? And so if you don't act right, and a social credit score, for example. So if you don't act right, all right, you can't buy tickets to an airplane anymore. You can't travel anymore. Sorry, buddy. You shouldn't have sent that tweet out. Um, and so controlling, and that's probably what's the most terrifying thing about Macron's statements, is that when he talks about blaming social media, yes, social media can be an inflamer. Like, I blame social media for a lot of things. I do it all the time, but I'm not a head of state, so it's okay. And I'm in no position to control police brutality. I'm an entirely disenfranchised human being. I barely believe in anything anymore. So, but these guys espouse that they do, and then they turn around and blame young people for being angry, right? It's like you said, it's the boomers' parents just being like kids these days. They don't want to work hard.
It's also such an avoidance of the actual problem. You're not solving anything. We're just wasting time and people's lives. Like we talk about life and the value of life, but we don't actually, there's no action behind it. It's just empty thoughts and prayers. And that's just weird and shocking to the core at some point. The fact that like this is a sitting head of state and he feels comfortable enough to blame video games in 2023. Video games, bro, that shit will spur your economy. Those video games that you're like dissing, that shit could spur
Man,
if you made France the esports hub of the
everyone,
world.
everybody knows that the Enlightenment was because of Grand Theft Auto. Everybody knows this, man. What are you talking?
There's just oh man, forget it. I can't say that. Delete that last sentence. Forget it. Listen, whatever you want to say it. I can't say what.
I was gonna say something that came to mind is that one thing that was huge in the news, a couple of months ago, was the whole BRICS situation. Not just went completely mum. I haven't heard anything about BRICS in the past few months.
That's called good PR, baby.
Because that's something that clearly is happening in the background still. And that
It's
clearly
also,
affects.
this is the time for hard work. They did the PR job. They're setting the like back end Indian, like Rajasthan and Brasilia are like doing crunching numbers right now. And in 3 months, you're gonna hear that, they're like up 18%.
Well,
And
but it's also the move. Everybody knows that's the move that you take. Everybody knows. How much I'm sounding like this now. But everyone knows that the move is fast blitz. That's the move to do. Lao Tzu's The Art of War, how you deal with things. You got to just keep hitting them. That's the strategy, right? And so you got to be prepared. You got to do your homework quietly. Let them laugh. Let them make fun. Let them leave them. We will see who has the last laugh. And then bam, hit him one. Next day, bam, hit him again. Next hour, bam, hit him again. Oh my God. And it's similar. Trudeau does this all the time, right? Like he's got so many what's that word they call? Not conspiracies. It's when you have a crisis, PR crisis. I don't know, man. You're dealing with a fallout every hour. So you just make a new lie to beat the last one. And you just keep going and you keep going. So nobody has a chance to deal with any of your transgresses. And then one day, come out in blackface again. And then, suddenly we're not talking about the carbon tax. And even if, as an example, even the three of us talking right now, it's so easy if I had an agenda for our discussion, which I probably should, but I don't. But if I did have an agenda for our discussion, and as a skilled conversationalist, I can take you places and you don't know you're going there. You'll think it's your idea. Right? Like you'll think it's your idea. And if I come at it from a sort of a narcissistic, I'm trying to control you way, that's how that's the playbook. That's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to make it so that you come up with the idea that I'm trying to get you to have. Because then it's going to stick with you. That's Buddhist. That's Buddha philosophy. That's not even like, that's not new. That's ancient.
Inception shit.
Yeah.
Can we end the show on current affairs with one final story, a little bit on the lighter side?
Oh, please, yes.
It's a sports story, but it's become political quite quickly. Australia is playing England in cricket. It's a series called The Ashes. It's been happening for the last 120 years. This is a tradition that dates back to the gentlemen's days, like genuinely. They played just 2 days ago or yesterday at a stadium called Lord's, which is considered the home of cricket. And so it's the ultimate in gentlemen's traditions where the crowd still comes into, most of the crowd will dress up in their Sunday finest for a day of Lord's Test cricket.
Have you been to
Especially
the stadium?
against Lord's,
Have you
Lord.
have you been to it?
I've driven outside of it.
I've driven past it as well a few times. I've never gone into it.
Very centrally located. It is
Yeah.
very centrally, like, it's a beautiful location. And the old rivals, Australia, are in town. And this year, just from a cricketing perspective, England produced a new brand of cricket. They're playing very aggressive. They usually are very conservative, and they have a coach from New Zealand. His name is Brendan McCullum, and he's instilled baseball in them, which is just to start hitting the ball as hard and as fast as you can. If you get out, no problem. No one cares.
Before you
This was-
continue, the Ashes is only the series is only England and Australia. No other teams involved in this.
Only England, Australia
year.
comes to England. They play tests, and then England goes to Australia the following year. They play tests, and then 4 years later, they do it all again. Home, away, home. Anyways, what happened was it was a very prickly moment in the match, and the Australians were very streetwise, and they got a guy out legally, but it wasn't necessarily ethical. It was against the spirit of the game, quote unquote. What they did was the right thing under the laws, under the textbook, but the English were very unhappy because they're like, this goes against the spirit of the game. And
Like one of those unwritten rules that you don't do.
the unwritten rules that gentlemen in this game will not do this action. It doesn't matter what the action is. It's about just the culture of cricket and the unspoken gentleman's conduct, code of conduct.
I'm curious about what the action is, because there's only so many ways to get someone out in cricket.
The bowler
like-
bowled the ball. The batsman, who was English, the Aussie bowler bowled it. The English batsman left it. The ball went past him. And usually you have to stay in your crease. Behind a certain line, you have to stay behind it. The English batsman, he put his bat down, like he signified that he's touched behind it, but then he walked out of his crease. But the ball was still in the Australian wicketkeeper's hands. The guy the bowler is bowling to, it was still in his hands, and he just threw it at the stumps and he hit the wickets. And technically, since he's out of his crease, he is technically out. And it was the end of an over. So what happens is usually you touch your bat and you can go walk over to your partner and just talk informally. And he had done this action of leaving his crease 3 balls before in a row. And so the wicketkeeper was street smart. He was a hustler. He saw that this guy keeps doing this. You know what? The last one, he took his chance and he got the guy out. And this was a match-changing moment. And it was very much, at the time that I was watching it, I very much was like, this is totally against the spirit of the game, but I'm down. And the Australians later on were completely unapologetic. And they said, the captain was like, I don't care. This is within the rules. We won the game. We're here to win the game. The British were they had their noses up to the sky, and they were saying, you'll be remembered for this for the rest of your life. This is what you'll be remembered for. I would never want to win like this. This is not how I play the game. And it extended to the crowd. This is why I kept mentioning Lord's, the home of cricket, which is generally a very sedate and respectful and polite crowd. They got into it and they started acting abusive to the point where at the end of the match, 3 of their members, who are like 80, 70, 80 years old, were suspended. You can no longer come back here because your code of conduct, the way you acted towards the Australian players, is unacceptable.
I have so many questions.
And by the end of it, so today, Rishi Sunak, the UK Prime Minister, he defended the British captain, the English captain, for saying, yeah, I too would never want to win like this. And the Australian Prime Minister Albanese backed his captain and said, hey, As long as you win, that's all they'll remember.
A win's a win.
Okay, I got a few questions. One, when it's the end of the over, isn't it at some point, isn't time called where now play is dead? And so it was still within the realm of play was still active.
Technically speaking, like again, if we're playing a formal round of cricket, yes, it's still active.
Which is what they were doing.
By day 3, day
Playing
4,
a
he was
formal-
acting as if they're playing in the park, and yeah, I can just do this. And like, I get what he was doing. It was a brain fart. I don't necessarily blame him, but bro, you're here to win. You're not here to just play basketball, which is the.
So I'm just asking, like in terms of like when it's in between overs, because then you're switching bowlers at that point. Like at one point, is it plays dead, and that is not relevant in terms of like the
That's
umpire
why
at
the
some
umpire
the
kicks
umpire's
in.
like
Umpire
stop.
kicks in. There is a fine line, but this one, it's like the ball just came into his hand and he just started walking. Usually, he
Okay.
would wait for the wicket keeper to give the ball to the umpire, or he would be in that act.
Oh,
and then,
okay.
But this was like, it was almost like the play is still going on and you're doing this.
My other question is, like, it's such a common way that you could potentially get someone out, but it's like the old hidden ball trick in baseball, where it still happens. People don't necessarily get really pissed off about it. They get more so pissed off at the runner not paying attention.
That's what, like, from the British side, as much as they hated what the Aussies did, it was also very annoying for them that how did one of
Fall for
ours
it.
have this brain fart?
And this may be a little bit different, but I feel like this happens to the English all the time. I think if there's
What
anyone
they invent sports and then they export it and they get shitty at it. What?
no, because okay, look, the analogy that jumped to my head for this, because what it says, it's really clear. If you're English, you think this is against the spirit of the game and it's dirty. And if you're Australian, hey man, a win's a win. Okay, easy peasy. And then I would say the same thing. I go back to 1986. I go back to the hand of God, and I say Argentina versus England, and I see Maradona scoring with the hand, and nobody remembers anything but the branded hand of God. But nobody remembers the hand of God. Everyone remembers Maradona as one of the greatest players of all time and the World Cup winner, and then Messi taking over that mantle. And that's the story that's told, not that there was a hand of God and that was all that was left. Even though that it's humorous that it happened to the English.
Nobody's ever going to remember Henri's handball in the World. Was it the World Cup?
I guess Irish. Yep.
Ireland.
Yeah. People don't remember these things unless you're like geeks.
But
like
that has a lasting impression though, because that sequence of events caused the whole confusion now of what handball is now, because that's when they started changing the rules. That's when they started changing the rules from like
and
intent and stuff like
go
that.
about
So
the rules.
there is a lasting impression with Henri's situation.
So if you break a rule and you get, I mean, there are some games like this where the goal is to break rules and get away with it. And if you can do that and you get away with it, then you win the game, and that's fine within the rules of the game, let's say. And it all depends, I think, on like your temperament and where you sit on the, almost like where you end up falling, right? So, and if you're English and you witness the hand of God and you go, that's so dirty. That's so dirty. No way. This is not how to win. This is not how to win. And like, you give up. You never play football again. Like you will just walk away and never play again because of that shit. But if you're Argentinian, you're like, man, use what you can, man. Like the ref didn't see.
Ref didn't call it. I mean, what do you want me to do?
The ref called a goal. I don't.
Like he could have given me a red card, baby. Like he could have given me a red card, but he didn't. And when Suarez saves the goal line against Ghana, and I was on Ghana's side at that point, and I was like, oh, no, and then he missed the penalty. And it worked. It ultimately worked. It's still, right? Like, it just how close, like how emotionally connected you are to the thing, right? Whether it be the Ashes or like how emotionally connected are you to the thing that you're going to fall into that.
The Suarez one is a really good example because what he did was not illegal, but it was unethical. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
However, it's also justified because they did win that game. So now
It worked.
the ends justifies the means. I think I
Yeah,
say
yeah.
this
Well,
often, right?
yeah, and that's the thing, and that's what's. I think it's an interesting story, and it's interesting also to see where you sit on it. Especially, like if you had told me the story, but then switched the players around, and you made Australia the guys that like I would have had a different response or reaction.
The internet, as is its wisdom, has now released ironic spirit videos of England where their players are clearly not working in the spirit of the game. And in fact, the coach of the English squad, who is a New Zealand player, he was a wicket keeper. And he broke the spirit of the game 2 different times, once against Zimbabwe, once against Sri Lanka. And 5 years after the Sri Lankan incident, he even admitted in a speech that what I did was wrong. So it's come back. It's all poetic justice. It's come back to bite him in the ass.
And the spirit is the game. Is I win. That's the spirit of the game. And if I don't win, then something went wrong.
This is
Someone must have been unethical.
This is the.
I'm
saying-
thinking something when we were talking the Suarez incident, and that brings me back to like the concept of the professional foul in football and soccer, and how someone's got a clear break, you're taking them down. How does Zidane's situation fall into that equation? Because he wasn't defending his team, he was defending his family.
No, I think he lost the game.
From what
man.
we know,
I
from
think
what
he
we
lost.
know.
He lost the game. I think with the Zidane headbutt at the end of the World Cup. I think players. I think like the thing is, Zidane had nothing to do, but he could have saved that headbutt for after the game. Like,
True.
Who is he defending his family from? A guy who's using words like
to
no,
piss
I
to
don't
to
fi-
wind him up. To wind him up.
But he
don't
know how to
find
wind him
that.
up.
Like that's
It worked.
that was the indefensible part. Is that, bro, you got used by like grade 3 tactics. This is
Yeah.
what we do in grade 3, and you fell hook, line, and sinker for it at
You-
the highest stage.
Yeah.
Yanni, what's wrong with you? Because I love Zidane, by the way. He is my more than Messi
but I'll
player
give you the
ability. He's
answer
my
for that.
favorite player.
I'll give you the French answer for that. Because in that moment, he wasn't French. Remember, he was Algerian.
He went back
We
to
come
his
full
his
circle.
base. Yeah, to his base temperament. Yeah, that part he had before he came and
A
became
Frenchman,
like,
a real Frenchman would never do that. It says his Algerian roots that brought that out. The hot-bloodedness, that Berber stuff, man. You got to keep that. You got to.
I'm sure Platini was very upset. Those who know, I made a Platini reference because Platini single-handedly, no, not single-handedly, he had friends. You should watch FIFA documentary and see what Platini did to FIFA.
And what Infantino's now doing, current
Yes, please
Right,
hand
of
over the baton. Please hand over.
Oh my God.
Let's not break this streak.
There's that, and then talk about shambles as we finish this episode. The Canadian Soccer Association is in shambles. DeVos is like, you have to declare bankruptcy, but we probably don't want to, but we shouldn't, but we have to. Like they have no money, and they're saying that in the next 3 international windows, Canada may only play both the women's and men's national teams may only be able to play in 1 international window. And we're like, this is when you start preparing for the World Cup that your country's hosting in 2026.
Man, you can call Qatar, ask them how it is like to host a World Cup when you don't know what you're doing. But Qatar actually turned it around, and they just
And beat Mexico.
They beat Mexico in the under 21 1-0.
1 shot on goal. 1 goal.
That's
all they had.
Miskin Mexico, man. Poor Mexico. Like I saw comments and Mexicans are like,
And what's even worse is going back to Canada as well, is that we're having a terrible time in the Gold Cup right now. It's just the high of making it to the World Cup, and then the expectations, and then, okay, fine, didn't get out of the group stage, whatever, fine, that, but good job being there, boys. It's been a disaster ever since. And there's no money. Money's depleted. Money's, and the Nations League, that whatever tournament that just played, I can't remember what it's called, whatever it was. People were complaining because the players were flying coach And they're like, "What the hell? You like, what the shit?" And then it came out right after, "We have no money." Stuff. Yeah.
Who has the money? That's my question. Oil and gas companies. But even Shell Pakistan closed, so even oil and gas companies in 2023 are closing. I don't know. I just do want to mention one quick thing. Combining Qatar 2022 and the France riots, Paris is due to hold the 2024 Summer Olympics, and they've announced hypocritically an alcohol ban inside of stadiums. And I do just wonder, in general, will the world rally around the French protesters against the Summer 24 Olympics the way they tried to do with the 22 World Cup in Qatar? Will the German Olympic team come out and show some support for all of these clearly marginalized people in France? Where's their human rights? I wonder.
Yeah. In which, yeah,
I think that's a great place to
the
end.
rebuttal, the biggest
Man,
rebuttal.
man, I would
the
say
French,
share.
the French will always have a rebuttal, though.
Put it in the comment. We're not French. Let's put it in the comments. Thanks a lot. Are we off our rockers? Are we still on it? Have we lost it slowly but surely? If you have any comments or topics you want us to discuss, something that we can share so we can bring to light to the world these atrocities to light and connect them to other things that have to do with other things, because that's exactly it. If we don't feel at home anywhere, then you can see things that other people can't. You can see connections that other people can't. And so go forth, my third culture kids. Go forth and multiply and go find people from other places and multiply with them. Peace, everybody.